There are other kind of media ethical issues that have come up in covering the attacks. I mean, shortly after the attacks, when the video that allegedly threatens New York came out, some stations showed it, some didn't. What do you think about that? When ISIS releases a video, the media instinct obviously is to show it because it's news, but that also is exactly what ISIS wants you to do because that's their tactic. So if you were a news director, would you show the threatening tape?
I think that there's a different question when there are like bodies on the screen, like people who have families and who might have a position on it. But I guess for me, I think the question of whether we're encouraging ISIS by showing those videos is so secondary to the broader question, which is like, what is our military policy and like what are the ways that our approach to like quote unquote like countering extremism in Muslim communities? Those are such more central questions to like whether we're confronting ISIS or opposing ISIS in the way we should, that I think for that to be like a central question for the media to kind of grapple with, to me it seems like a distraction to the broader question, right? I don't know, what do you think?
I totally agree. And to your question, I think we do obviously need to cover this, right? Like this is very real. It's going on everywhere. It's happened here in New York. But I think the manner in which we cover it, the sensationalism, that is the problem. And just the fear mongering and creating hysteria. And that's
But if they're not showing the tape, then to some degree they're not sensationalizing, right? I mean, the most sensational thing would be to show the tape that shows the guys filming Herald Square and Times Square and zipping up their jacket.
Right.
They decided not to do that, which is interesting.
Right, which I think that's actually a good decision not to show that. I do, because that is in a sense, and you are giving them a platform to showcase their stuff, and you're giving them publicity, almost in the same way when there's like a mass shooting or a gun shooting. You know, if you keep saying the shooter's name and giving them publicity, that's what they want at the end of the day. So you don't want to do that, but it's like you want to educate and inform the public and have them be aware that this is a reality and it could happen. But the constant, like daily, all day, all night, like this is inevitable, it's gonna happen, Muslims are evil, boom, 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 boom. That's where I have the problem with it, because it ends up sensationalizing something that you should just be educated about.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, one of the things that bothers me about the coverage of ISIS and Al-Qaeda is the difficulty in sort of separating the fact that the action is obviously amoral and evil to kill people, but trying to get down to root causes or the things that might be part of why a particular person goes from being, a suburban kid in Syria to being an ISIS member. Has anyone in the media really kind of delved into where they come from with any kind of sensitivity or insight?
I think there are like academics and writers, people like Arun Gudnani, who have considered questions kind of peripheral to this. I think, for example, one question to look at is the way that like our countering violent extremism programs, in a lot of ways, the ones that have been implemented for a long time in the UK and are starting to be implemented here, really kind of create a surveillance apparatus for like especially kids who are talking about these issues. And I think for a lot of Muslim kids who are being exposed to these ideas and are also maybe facing Islamophobia at home or in their schools, I think it's important that they have spaces to talk about ISIS's ideology and their recruiting strategy and questions about the war on terror and is the war on terror a war on Islam, that it's really important that Muslim kids can like engage with their religious leaders and their family members in these conversations, and that if we criminalize those spaces, that really makes it more difficult for kids to explore those ideas.
And is that what CVE does?
Countering violent extremism.
Yeah. Does it create that sort of pressure or scrutinize those spaces?
Yeah, it basically says that like schools, or it's much more in place in the UK than it is here, but it essentially says that there are certain like predictors of what will lead someone to engage in violent behavior. And in the UK, at least, that can include like, dressing more religiously or like becoming depressed or becoming socially active, right?
Right.
And that, or if you engage in kinds of questions like you say that homosexuality is a sin, or you like make certain statements about jihad, right? And that teachers should be on the lookout, or health professionals, for these kids who are becoming vulnerable to terrorism.
But I think we need to be really careful with stuff like that, because if somebody, let's say they just want to be more religious themselves, they choose to pray more,
Right.
or they go to the mosque more, they shouldn't be quote unquote red flagged. And there's been, so much of that happened here post 9/11. Like we've had so much surveillance of Muslim communities. We have the demographics unit, which was supposedly dissolved. But, the Muslim community always does feel very, stigmatized and feels like they're always constantly being surveilled. And, we have a running joke in my family, like, if we're on the phone and somebody says something and we're like, oh, make sure, whoever's listening jotted that down correctly. Because we always have this thing like, oh yeah, there's somebody listening on the other end, and as we learned through Snowden and NSA, that is very well true.